Welcome to Recovery Uncovered, your all things recovery podcast. Recovery Uncovered is produced by MHAB Enterprises, a division of the Northeast Group of companies located right here in Plattsburgh, New York. I'm your host, Mike Carpenter,
affectionately known as MHAB Mike, and I'm your co-host, Betsy Vicencio,
affectionately known as BV the Normie. We have one goal in these podcasts, and that's not to suck. Thanks for tuning in. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Recovery Uncovered, podcast number 14. I'm your host, Mike Carpenter, affectionately known as MHAB Mike. You can see that we fired my sidekick, Betsy Vicencio. She will not be returning. That's not true. She'll come back at some point. She's in sunny Aruba for 2 weeks, so you're stuck with me doing this all by myself. And in fact, our guest today asked where Betsy was, and I think he's disappointed that it's only going to be me and not Betsy, but we'll have a good time. So, yeah, this is our 14th episode. That's really cool. And this is much more difficult for me without Betsy to kind of prompt me into the things that we're going to say. But I will tell you before we get started and I introduce my guest, I was researching some numbers today, and we mentioned at the last podcast that COVID's over and we're beyond it. We're not using COVID out anymore. And, now we're back to what I consider the real pandemic that's been going on for the last 30 or 40 years, which is the scourge of death from alcoholism and drug addiction and poverty and all of those things. Bryn, do you need to get your phone this morning? That's
all part of the excitement.
That's awesome, Bryn. By the way, before we get started today, next week's podcast will be a behind-the-scenes look at Bryn Judkins and Telly Schwartz, who are going to be on this side of the camera. So it should be a lot of fun. So, yes, I was looking at the numbers, and, the numbers of people still dying from overdose deaths and alcoholism and those things continue to rise. So I'm glad we'll get back to focusing on that. And so we'll launch right into this and go with our guest. Our guest today is a gentleman that I met many years ago, and I credit him with being one of the guys who dragged me out of the shadows and put me in somewhat of the public eye. And I thank you and curse you for that all at the same time, because there are days when I really like it and days when I wish I was left alone. But John Bernardi is the executive director of the United Way of Clinton County or North Country region. Did I get
Adirondack region.
Thank you, Adirondack.
President and CEO. Close enough.
All right, let's start over. John Bernardi is the president and CEO of the Adirondack region of the United Way.
We're good friends. He knows all about me.
Amongst other things. I was just going to say John Bernardi is the best skier in the North Country. That would probably be the most appropriate introduction for you. The president and CEO of the United Way, which in my opinion, and I think many people's opinion, is the premier nonprofit help people organization in this part of the country and probably all over the country. And the uniqueness about you guys, and I'll talk a little about our company and what we do, the uniqueness is you give to so many different organizations. You are like the umbrella that helps all of the smaller organizations be able to function. So welcome. Thanks for coming. And thanks for not putting on a tie.
No, I'm going casual today.
Billy Jones, the only one who came here and put on a tie.
Of course
I'm like,
he did.
Really, Billy?
You would expect nothing less.
Suit and a tie. I'm like, he's so clean cut. Yeah. So, yes, and I'm sorry Betsy's not here. I know she's one of your favorites too. So we'll have to have you back in a year or two and talk with Betsy.
Sure.
So let's launch right into it. So you've been the president and CEO of the United Way for a long time. Tell me.
Just about 15 years.
So following
But I've been in the human service field my whole life. It's all I've ever done. So 35 or 36 years, various capacities in the mental health field and counseling.
Didn't you run a kids group? I
was the Head Start director
right.
in Essex County. Prior to that, I was at what used to be the Camelot Boys Home in Lake Placid, which is now Mountain Lake Academy.
Yep.
Working in a residential treatment facility, and then I went on to be the Head Start director, then the CEO at ACAP, the Community Action Agency in Essex County, and various other places, and landed at United Way of the Adirondack region, which was Clinton County at the time.
Right.
Then we added Essex County. Then we added Franklin County and became a regional organization.
15 years ago?
15 years.
That's when you came. Did you think that was when you were younger? That was where you'd wind up when you were getting old?
Never in my wildest dreams. I was having lunch one day with my old friend Mike Mannix, who you'll remember, because he was a dear friend of your dad's. Herb and Mike were
very
best
close
buddies. Yeah. And Mike and I became good friends when I was at ACAP. We were one of the partner agencies of the United Way at the time. Mike was the CEO exec at the time. And we became very friendly. And we were having lunch one day in Elizabethtown, and he said, "John, I'm going to retire." And I said, "Mike, I'm sorry to hear that. That's going to be a great loss for the human service network across the region." He said, "Yeah, I'm ready to go." He said, "I think you should throw your hat in the ring." And I said, "I appreciate that. I'm very happy with what I'm doing." I was at ACAP, and I was very happy. And he said, "Well, just give it some thought." And I did, and I threw my hat in the ring and ended up there. So it was not something I had ever imagined or planned to do.
You walked into a position with incredibly tough shoes to fill. I think a lot of people, even in the beginning, were like, "All right, who's this clown Bernardi, and how's he going to fill in for, all this guy wants to do is ski and drink cognac up at the mountain. He's not, how's he going to fill in for this icon of the world?" But I think in short order, most of us in this community recognize that you're not going to replace him like Mannix, but we did a pretty good job here getting somebody who could fill the role and take it in a new, it's almost funny, John, Mike wasn't your father, but it's not dissimilar than mine with my father. I stepped into this business, like, how am I going to follow in Herb Carpenter's shoes? And it took me a while, but I kind of carved my own way and have found my own, things to do, and I think yours is somewhat similar.
It is, and it was new. That whole process was new to me, because prior to that, I had stepped in to fix everything. And places I had gone to work prior to that were places that had experienced various difficulties, and so I was expected to fix it and make it better. And this was very different when I stepped in here. Instead of, "You fix this place and make it better, and we're counting on you."
Don't change a damn thing.
Well, not that as much as don't screw it up. And it took me years, but it was okay, because he was someone I respected and admired a great deal. We had a very friendly, close relationship. So when people held me to Mike's standard, it was okay. If I didn't really love the guy, then it might have been more difficult. But he was just top of the line, that guy. So it was okay that I was following him, and it pushed me.
It's funny, when I took over for the business from my father, it was a struggle. It was a struggle for me. And somebody once said to me, I don't think it was you, although you've given me tons of good advice over the years, but I think it was somebody else who said, rather than being upset that your father's this, powerful icon in the community, why don't you embrace that? Become your own person, but don't use your father, but remember that that's a benefit to you. It really can help you. And when I started looking at it differently like that, that's when I think I started to flourish on my own, as opposed to, being in his shadows. So.
Well, for me, absolutely, and for me, a turning point was many years ago. I still call around Christmas time. I call Mike's widow, Judy Mannix, every year. I don't barely know her, but I always did right from the get-go. When Mike died, by the way, Mike died a year after he retired. I started in December of '06, and Mike was supposed to stay on for a couple months during the transition, but 3 days into it, he said, "You need me to hang around here?" I said, "You know what, Mike, I don't. Go enjoy your retirement. I know where to find you." So he went about his retirement and then died less than a year after he retired. It was tragic.
It's so sad.
But I kept in touch with Judy, who I don't know well, but I called her, and I call her every year around Christmas time just to say hello, and she's a donor, and she's great. And several years ago, she said to me, "You know what, John? Mike would be immensely proud of what you have done with that organization." And I said, "That's it. It's all I needed to know. It's all I needed to hear from that point on."
You know, that's one of those little stories that probably doesn't get a lot of public recognition. Maybe a lot of people don't know about it, but that's the character of people like you or people in this community. You know, one of the things you always have talked about over the years that I've known you is we're lucky in this community. We have a tremendous amount of people with, you know, high character who work together. And we have our differences and we fight, we argue, you know, that happens. But sure. By and large, this community really jumps in together whenever somebody needs something. It really is. And you've been a proponent of pushing that from the day that I met you.
I really believe that's our greatest asset because like any region, we have our set of challenges, as you just mentioned, and those will continue. But one of the things we do really well in this region is collaborate, cooperate, partner, and support each other. There's very little territoriality. And you see this in other regions. I see it all the time or hear about it from my colleagues across the state and other nonprofits especially, where they're very territorial around what their role is, what their territory is, what their focus is, and they don't play as well in the sandbox as we do. And we're great. You know, MHAB's a good example of that. When you had this idea and this to meet this need in the community, and you started to reach out to people to get their input, me included, I was proud to be part of that conversation early on. People rallied around the idea, and you were able to pull all those partners together in short order. And that wouldn't happen everywhere. There would be a whole conflictual process that you would have needed to go through in other areas.
Yeah, I think we had over 30, and I never had any of them say no or let me think about this. Everybody was like, that's a great idea. It's needed. How can we help? What is it you need from us? What we do? So you're right. It's always, and we've done the same thing. If people have called me and said, yeah, I'm in, sure, what do you need? I know, you know, my wife obviously is in housing and works for BHSN, and when they were getting ready to think about the Northwoods project, I think we, along with you and a whole bunch of other people, wrote them letters of support every year until they got it approved. She never struggled with getting people to, you know, sign on and say we're in. So you're right. We have a tremendous amount of respect for each other, even in the private business community. You know, we're pretty big in the warehouse business. All the people who run warehouses around here are friends of mine on some level, and we're, you know, you have trade secrets, you're going to keep that, but we're friendly competitors. Like we're not viciously trying to put each other out of business. We're not. It's like what can we do to help this area? You know, wherever we can grow and bring more people and more resources, I think is great for us.
Absolutely.
So tell me about the United Way. What does the United Way actually do?
Well, we're a comprehensive nonprofit human service organization. People know us mostly as raising money and then making investments and funding programs, and that's certainly a big part of what we do, but it's much more than that. And actually what I just described isn't enough anymore. There's a lot of people raising money. You have to be relevant to the needs of the community. And my focus, Mike, you and I have known each other a long time and have become good friends, so you know a lot of this, but I'm a human service guy. I'm not a fundraiser. You know, I don't consider myself a professional fundraiser. We do raise money, and we're pretty good at it. And it's important that we do that. But my focus and my lens in which I view my work is always through the human service helping lens. That's my background. So my philosophy has always been, let's put ourselves out there as a relevant, important organization that's making a difference in the daily lives of people. And the funds will come as a result of that. So that's been my strategy all along.
Well, we know you're not a fundraiser, and I'll tell you how we know that. So every year, I think our company has pretty good level of donation from our employees. We tout the United Way, and we try hard to get everybody
Top 10 every year.
Yeah, we try hard, and so every year somebody from the United Way comes and gives the presentation. And the last time that you came, I think I had 3 or 4 people come up to me after and go, "Can you have that woman Kathy come? We didn't like John as much." So it's like, all right, from now on, when the United Way guy comes, we don't want Bernardi. We want Kathy or one of the people from the fundraising team.
Yeah.
Maybe they're more engaging or they have more fun
there
at
go.
it. So I'm validating that,
there
yes, fundraising is not your strong suit.
I'm not afraid of it. In fact, there's I've been able to develop a lot of really wonderful relationships across the region with philanthropists. And but again, even when I talk with them, it's always about the impact we can make and not necessarily the art of the deal.
Yes, I think you're right, John. I've never once seen you in a place where I felt like you were trying to sell me something.
Right.
You're there telling me what you do and if we can help out. And, when we talk to our employees, and many of our employees are paid money that puts them in that Alice category.
Right.
So they don't have a ton of extra money, yet they all want to give something. And they want to give something, I think, for a couple reasons. Number one, they believe in your organization for a lot of reasons. Number two, they get oftentimes to be part of where that money goes. And so, if you think about me and my kind of passion is addiction and mental health, and because I've been affected by it, whereas other people might have had hospice that, cared for their dying parent. So people get to choose, kind of say, look, I want to give to the United Way, but I'd like my money to go and help in this area. I think that's such an important component of it.
It is for sure. And your group is a prime example of the relationships that we've built across the region. So if you or one of your people were to call our office, and they do periodically, because they need something or need some help or need some connection with a service, we're going to give you 110% of our time and effort. It's never taken for granted. Therefore, when campaign time rolls around, you're not hearing from us just once a year because we're looking for your money. You're instead thinking, that's a great organization. It's a no-brainer that we're going to support them, and that's my strategy.
Yeah. Means you're not like a politician.
Well,
who we hear from once
I don't think I'm like a politician, but oddly enough, I'm called that a lot. People
a politician,
say to me,
you
Bernardi,
do.
you're such a politician.
You are pretty. You know
schmoozer.
what?
I'm a schmoozer.
You are. Betsy and I remark about it all the time. Like, it's not possible to say no to Bernardi. If he shows up at my office, I'm like, oh shit, this is going to cost me money or time or something because I can't say no. You're like the Godfather. It's like John Bernardi asks, and you just say yes. So one of the big things that you pushed for years is this whole idea of Alice that I don't know a whole lot about. I don't even know where the phrase came from, and I know it means asset limited something. I don't know what it means. So let's talk about Alice, because I'd like to talk about that, and I think that brings us into the context of recovery, because not that everybody who's an addict struggles with poverty, but it certainly is much more prevalent in the community that is less affluent. So what does the whole Alice mean?
Alice is a wonderful initiative that we launched many years ago.
Was that launched here, John? Was that
Well, we were one of the first organizations to launch it, but at the same time, there were other United Ways in New York State that were doing. But we were on the ground floor of it. In fact, I chair what they call the Alice Steering Committee statewide, which is a statewide group. But Alice stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. It's an acronym.
Right.
What we used to call the working poor. And it's okay to say working poor. It's not, I don't use it a lot, that term, because even though it's okay, it is what it is. Poverty is what it is. You got to call it what it is, and you have to really understand it. You can't sugarcoat poverty. Poverty is poverty.
Right.
But we used to say the working poor. I don't use that term a lot, just because it has a little bit of a negative connotation, even though it was never been intended to. Alice is another way of looking at it. It actually creates a new lens in which to view poverty through. And it's really fascinating. We've done extensive data around financial instability for families in our region. And what we determined was there are two ends of poverty in our region. The one end is the federal poverty limit. So on this hand is the federal poverty limit, which is ridiculously around $12,500 for an individual.
I think that number is actually lower than the minimum wage, right? I think the federal poverty level is
depending on how many hours you work.
Right. For a full-time employee, yeah.
But it's 12.5 or so for an individual. So that's the federal poverty, and it's $23,000 for a family of 4. So that's the poverty limit on this left hand. Okay. Over here is what we call the Alice threshold, and so our research has determined that an individual in our region would need to make around $23,000 a year just to begin to live independently. That's not high on the hog.
I was going to say,
barely getting by.
When you say live independently, a roof over their head, possibly a car, maybe to drive.
Without government assistance.
Without government, enough food in their cupboard, and
barely.
Right.
And we also know that a family of 4 would need, well, here in Clinton County, $58,000 a year. Okay, so you got federal poverty limit here at $12,500 for an individual and $23,000 for a family of 4, and that's what determines most of the eligibility for assistance. Then you got the Alice threshold at $23,000 for an individual and $58,000 for a family of 4. So in between those two levels are tens of thousands of families in our region. They make a little too much to get most of the government assistance, but not enough to live without fear of going over the financial cliff.
Right.
So things you and I would take for granted, Mike, like a flat tire or a leaky roof or a broken furnace, to us those are pains in the neck. Those are inconveniences. They might cause us to have to take some time off from work or make some calls or use some credit card that we were trying to phase out or these other nuisances. But they're not going to cause you or I to lose our job, become homeless, or have to make a decision whether I get my medication or my groceries.
Right.
But there are tens of thousands of families in our region that are so close to that financial cliff. And this is despite their efforts to work 2 and 3 jobs. And you got a lot of good, hardworking people here in this organization. I know it for a fact. And
therein is the issue. Those people feel like I'm busting my ass to do this. And I literally am a flat tire away from losing everything that I have.
Right. So Alice shines a light on this group of people and is designed to create strategies, awareness first of all, like you're doing with me, which is wonderful. But then also strategies to try to address some of these concerns. And we actually have some really good models of programs that have been developed as a result of Alice. For example, really quick, we've brought back a pilot called Wheels to Work. This helps people either purchase a vehicle or repair a vehicle for work purposes. It has to be tied to employment. And as you know, transportation is a huge issue in our region. The other thing, this is really exciting that we're starting with some partners like similar to the MHAB partnership. We've assembled a group of partners and we're starting a microfinancing program for Alice families so they can borrow a relatively modest amount of money, $3,000 to $5,000, up to $10,000 for vehicles if they need them. It could be vital home repairs and other things of that nature at and the rate that they would need to pay it back is adjusted so that they can work it into their budget.
Right.
Because a lot of families can't go get a loan. You and I, if we need to borrow money, we go to the bank and sign the paper and you borrow money. We're very lucky. A lot of families aren't able to do that.
Right.
So
that's great stuff. The best thing about that is, and I know you well enough to know that shining a light on it is step one, but then shining a light on it and saying, look what we did, we shined a light on it, doesn't really mean anything if you're not actually going the extra mile and saying, okay, now what do we do to help here? And I remember I come to every one of your breakfasts and, the dinners for the United Way. And I remember a couple years ago looking around that room and recognizing that there are people who are in the help field, who are helping people who are less fortunate than them, that fall into the Alice category. So here are people who are committing their life to saying, I want to help people who are less fortunate than me, and they're living in that area that one flat tire could cripple them, and yet it's so noble. Like I almost tear up thinking about it. Like, my God, we have these people, and it's one of the things that I've always said, John, is we need to not let the really poor and the people who can't work suffer. We need to take care of them. But there is that divide when you're trying to get out of there to where you and I are effectively. That ladder is really, really steep, and the help that's there is limited. I've had stories, but I have one particular one of a woman who worked for me, and she wasn't making a lot of money, and she was able to get HEAP assistance and a few other things, possibly, I don't want to call it food stamps, SNAP benefits.
Yeah.
SNAP benefits. And we gave her a raise, I think 50 or 75 cents an hour. And a couple weeks later, she came back to me and asked me to take the raise back. And I said, why would I do that? You earned it, you deserve it. And she said, well, because it put me over the income level that I can't get help with my fuel oil, but it doesn't give me enough to be able to pay for my own fuel oil. And that's a real story. That's not embellished. That's not somebody trying to, that's a person who is working their ass off trying to get better, and is being told that, okay, well, now you've made too much, and there's no validity to it. She's not making too much money. So I'm incredibly happy we're doing some stuff about that. Yeah. And I know that's been one of the big initiatives that the United Way did.
I love Alice. I'm really proud of Alice. We got a long way to go, Mike, to your point. And I see that all the time. I've had people in my office that, I've promoted, and they've said, thanks for the promotion, but I'm not sure you realize the hardships that promotion has created, because I just lost 3 major benefits because I just crossed over by a few dollars.
Right.
And so, but to your point about people working in the human service field, there are probably the majority of people that work in the human service field are Alice families. And it's sometimes they're drawn to that type of work because of their own struggles.
Because they've had their own struggles,
life.
Sure. Yep.
And they make excellent workers because they can relate to people. But the other thing that we're pleased about, back to awareness for a minute, is people use the lingo a lot. You mentioned Billy Jones, our good friend Billy Jones, who we love. We like to pick on, but what a guy. He uses it all the time. He speaks Alice.
Right.
I've heard the governor speak Alice, and the governor's people speak Alice. Among human service providers, you hear it more and more. And we've had a number of donors come forward in recent years, some anonymously, others publicly, to say that they love Alice, they love what we're doing, and here's a big check, and we want it to go to Alice. So we've actually created a special fund within our organization. We have our regular campaign and allocation process that is a really great process. And then we've also created this Alice component because donors have asked for it. And this is a fund we manage. We don't allocate those funds out.
Right.
We manage those funds. So if somebody from the Northeast group, for example, needs something to help them maintain their employment or whatever it might be, we would utilize usually other partner agencies, but we would find a way to help people with these special funds that we have.
I actually think Kathleen, that works for us and kind of does human resources, has contacted you guys a few times with some employees.
We usually hear from her a couple times a month, which is great.
Yeah.
Really great.
Yeah, it is. Those are the kinds of things that I don't think we talk about enough. We talk about the safety net for the people that are way at the bottom,
right.
But those lower income, working poor, Alice, it is a really tough place. And so many of them are trying so hard, and it's so easy to become defeated. It's like, I've been kicked around all my life. They don't trust the system. They don't trust people. They don't, you have all of these problems. They struggle with substance abuse, mental health, lack of education, whatever. There's a ton of things that go on. on. And then they get to this place where they have a job and they're working and they're starting to make a little bit of inroads, and then, like you said, the furnace craps out or the car goes down, and they're like, well, what's the point? Before, I was better just doing before. And so we're really trying to say, no, there is a point, and there are resources to help. Part of the other thing, and what Alice has done, and I think SPARCC kind of takes this same thing and does it in a more specific way, John, is the whole stigma piece that goes with people. And you know, you and I think, have been huge advocates of saying we need to eradicate stigma that somehow people who are less fortunate are less people. And I think that that's probably where you start with this, that just because somebody isn't highly educated or hasn't been able to make it in their life doesn't make them less of an individual that doesn't deserve the same opportunities as everybody else has. And part of that is the stigma piece. You're right. You know, saying to somebody you're poor as opposed to saying to somebody you're Alice, it makes it different, and it makes it different for those people. You know, the word addict has been kicked around for years, and I personally don't mind when people say I'm an addict, and I acknowledge as one, but it does have a negative connotation for people who don't understand. They look and they go, oh, that guy's an addict, and all of a sudden that says, well, he's this, he's this, he's this, he's this, or she's this, this, this. So I think stigma is a huge part. And so let's stay in Alice a little bit, but let's switch to SPARCC as well. So SPARCC stands for Substance Abuse Prevention
and Recovery
of Clinton County. Thank you. Of which you were a driving force, I think, in getting it started here, as well as become a chair. Tell me a little about how that started, because I didn't get involved till after it had been here for a few years.
Well, SPARCC actually emerged, of course, when we had the latest round of the heroin and opioid epidemic. And actually, I got to give some credit to Janet Dupree, our former assemblywoman, because she was a big driving force there as well. And she got a group together of professionals from this area and attended some type of a conference or some type of a big meeting in Vermont, if I recall. Yep. And that was this idea of building these regional and community-based coalitions. And SPARCC emerged from that and grew really quickly. You were in on the ground floor. I remember when the first meeting you came to. I remember you actually calling me and saying, "What the heck's going on with the SPARCC thing? I want to come to one of those meetings." I said, "Come on!" And where was that meeting? I remember you being there. West Side Ballroom. We had half of the room.
That's right. Yep. Yes, West Side Ballroom.
I remember you coming in for the first time, and you got the floor for a minute, and you just wowed everybody with your empathy and your understanding of the whole issue. And anyway, the coalition grew very strongly. We, as you know, you and I are both on the steering committee still, and I think we have a meeting this week.
I think it's Thursday, Thursday morning, right?
But we acted really quickly. Again, goes back to that quality we share in this region, where we can just get together quickly and dig our heels in and do the work that needs to be done. We're stubborn in that respect in this region. When something is big like that, we're ready to go. But we did some really great things. We had, as you know, some great events at the Strand, which really were very useful, and we've had several events and several initiatives that have helped to raise awareness of the issue and bring partners and providers and people together to figure out how we can support people who are struggling with addiction, and we were able to do some really great things. Our work's not done. You know, we're only part way through the journey.
I remember that first. So I think in the time that I've been on SPARCC, we've had three chairs. We had Peter Trout, and Peter's a good friend of mine, but he didn't get anything done. And I could say that, and I'll tell him that's fine. I'll tell him to watch the podcast. He'll expect nothing less from me. And then we put the Godfather in charge, and all of a sudden things started to flourish. It's like, Bernardi's here. He tells you to do something, you do it.
It was fun.
The first event we put together, I remember it was Christine Peters, spearheaded that event at the Strand. And I think we had like a packed house, or pretty close to a packed house at the Strand, which is just amazing. You know, people came to listen to a presentation about opiates and substance use and what we're going to do here, which I think is phenomenal. And then we put together a work-related one, which has really been my thing. I remember that first meeting that I went to, we went around and introduced, and there were about 50 people, 50, 60 people at that first meeting, and I was one of the last people to go. And I introduced myself, said who I was, and I said, you know, I think that we have to recognize that the problem with addiction is not just a problem for you guys that work in the field. We need businesses to be involved in this. I'm the only private business person here. Like, we need to figure out a way to get businesses engaged. And so I took that kind of mantle and ran with it and said, you know, let's get business. And I think we've done some good things around that. And that's all it takes, is it takes that little spark. And then, you know, somebody says, this is going to be the area that I focus on. And the other piece that we have really pushed for, you put together a video, and I know you don't like taking credit for it, but the video.
Actually, I do. I'm immensely proud of that documentary.
John Bernardi put together a video that is as good as there is. Okay? I know it's good for your ego, of which I got to be a part of, and that video is phenomenal. And we put that together on the heels of, there was a national one called Chasing the Dragon that we showed. And we went to the schools and showed that as an organization. And I think it was good. Might have been a little harsh, might have been a little over the top for some of the younger students. So we put together a regional video here with people in recovery and professionals, and it is well done. And it's been shown an awful lot of times, and I'm immensely proud of it too. I was immensely proud to be a part of it. But you know, that video is great, and in that, and in the organization, the whole idea of stigma around these things is something that we've really tried to do. What's your take on stigma with regards to poverty and substance use and mental health? How are we doing with regards to that?
It's a real challenge. It continues to be a real challenge, and in many cases, as you well know, because you've been a real champion of the issue, it becomes a barrier to communication sometimes, and to being able to foster these types of relationships that support people. What it comes down to is empathy. It really, whether it's substance abuse or mental health or poverty or any number of other challenges that people face, it comes down to empathy. It's understanding, in a way, what someone else is experiencing and being able to relate to that on some level. And I can't always relate to things specifically the way others can if I haven't experienced it firsthand. But I can still be empathetic. I can still take the time to understand what the challenges are and how that affects people, and to really put any judgments aside. And we've made some progress, but we're not there yet. There's still a fair amount of that stigmatization on, and again, a variety of different issues. And the part that concerns me mostly around that is it becomes a barrier sometimes to people getting the kind of support that they need. And I always say, and I mean it, that you never know when you yourself are going to need help. So hold off on your judgment around somebody else's journey, because when you least expect it, you turn the next corner, and there you are, right there in the middle of something you didn't ever expect, and now you need help, and you don't want to be judged, and you want people to be empathetic toward your experience.
It's almost like in the old days when they used to say, be kind to the people you meet on the way up, because you're going to meet the same people on the way down. Like, and I don't think they understood that that's what they were trying to promote, but that is some of it. Like, it's like, so I received an award last week at Clinton Community College, for which you didn't attend, and I haven't yet forgiven you for that. But
I'm ashamed.
So it's a good thing I love you so much, and I forgive you. But so I received an award, and the point of this story is not to talk about the award as much as the room is filled with relatively powerful people from this community, political, business leaders, and it's also filled with people who are friends of mine who struggled with addiction, poverty, all the things we're talking about, and have righted the ship and gotten their life. And they're mixed in this setting, social speeches, the whole thing, and I remember standing in the background before I received the award looking, going, I think we've made tremendous progress in normalizing this. I think that, that side of the room that is the people who have been very successful in their life and done great things is beginning to look at the other side of the room and realize that those people aren't all just people who can't make it or are lazy or aren't doing anything. They're people who struggled with some problems. And that to me was the most heartwarming piece of the whole event, was that we're beginning to normalize it. I suppose I get some credit for that because I'm pretty public about my own struggles and talk about it. And now there's a lot of other people that are willing to do that. And then, you have the Billy Jones of the world and the other people who are saying, wow, these people aren't like separate. I told this story, and I think I've told it to you before. One of my things, education is important, but education doesn't mean that everybody needs to be a doctor or a lawyer. There are other forms of education. And one of the greatest stories that I ever heard was, doctors are important, lawyers are important, so are auto mechanics. And if I break down in the middle of the Adirondacks in the middle of winter and I have a lawyer, a doctor, and an auto mechanic with me, all of a sudden that auto mechanic becomes way more valuable to me than the lawyer and the doctor is. And why can't we get to the point that we don't have to wait for an automobile breakdown to have that happen? Like, why can't we just look at those people and say they are just as valuable? Like, we need everybody, we need the whole world. And when we do that, we're a better society. And those people who live in that Alice world or below that Alice world, John, they get to this place where they're above the Alice world. And then when they become above it, that's a terrible way to phrase it, because I just mean when they get out of the Alice world, they're willing to help because they've been there. They recognize that I lived in that. And there were great people like John Bernardi and his team or others that helped me when I was there. I want to make sure that I do that. Like, you know what I mean?
It's infectious, for sure.
I think the struggle piece makes such a huge component of it. The other thing that you do, and I've always been impressed by this, is you run an organization that's actually has a pretty wide reach. With how many employees?
Well, 4 right now. As many as 8 fluctuates from 4 to 8.
That is really
it's small. We're a small organization.
When you think about what you guys do up there, it is. I'm incredibly impressed. I listened to, Kathy Snow, who I think is your right-hand person, and she's up at 5 a.m, traveling all over the North Country to make presentations, and it really is impressive that with such a small organization you do that. Now, I know you have a board, and you have a
lot of volunteers that support our work as well.
And you have the allocation committee, right?
Correct.
So tell me a little. I've always been intrigued by that. Tell me what
the allocation committee is a great group. It's chaired by Vicki Marking, who is with Layer 8 now.
Right. I know. I keep thinking Pride Blake, but it's
Layer 8. And Vicki's been on our board for a long time. And 10 other community members, and they look at our investments in the community, our allocation of funds in the community, and they really scrutinize applications and agencies to make sure that our funds are going to be used to the best effectiveness, and then they make a recommendation to the board. So they typically meet in the spring, early spring, late winter for 6 weeks or so, but it's very intense, very intense. And they're just a great group that really, again, make sure that we're accountable to our supporters and that we're making investments that are truly making a difference. And that's really important. Our donors expect that. So the allocation, I'm very proud of our allocation process. So when I'm out raising money or talking to people about the work we do, I can speak from a very confident and proud perspective on what we do, because we're very good stewards of community resources. I mentioned this other Alice Fund that we've created, and we were approached by a large foundation last year during the pandemic, who said, and they're based in Syracuse, but they wanted to make a difference in this region. And they approached us and said, we love your Alice program, and we want to make a large investment, and we want you to manage it to make sure that it's used to help Alice families in the region. So it was $255,000 last year, and they just gave us another $127,500 for this year. And so we're able to do all of these creative, unique things with that, and some are very basic. Could be car repairs for an individual family. It could be scholarship funds so Alice families can send their kids to Camp Jericho. Wow. Things of that, so, and that, all sorts of things in between.
One of the other things that you've always done for us, so we do at our very small company with 50 employees, we do a 50-50 raffle every Friday. And that 50-50 raffle, 50% goes to the winner, although probably half the time the winner just puts the money back in the till. And the other 50% goes to what we call the Kids Fund. Mm-hmm. And at Christmas every year,
I love this program.
We take that money, and it's usually $2,000-$3,000 that we've raised, and we go to you and we say, and you know me, so you know what I'm looking for. I love helping people, but I love helping people that are in that Alice category, that are trying hard, single moms, single dads, working 2 jobs, trying to get an education, trying to do that, raise their kids, and can't have Christmas for their kids. And you send us families, usually there's 3, 4, 6 families, whatever it is, and we get lists of all the kids, what the kids want for Christmas, what was on their Christmas list. And our employees actually take that money and take 1 kid or 2 kids or whatever, and the employees actually go out and shop for that. And then we buy all the gifts that we can, and we have a big wrapping party in the conference room, and we wrap the gifts, and then sometimes I do it, sometimes Pete does it, who kind of oversees this. We get to bring them up to you, and you disperse them to the families.
It's amazing.
What I tell everybody about that, John, I say, at that last meeting before we all break for Christmas, I say, on Christmas morning, I hope you all get up and enjoy your time with your family and do whatever it is that you do. But I hope that you take 2 or 3 minutes and step back and think that there are kids opening gifts today that wouldn't have had Christmas because of this small contribution that you make and our relationship with the United Way, who help us. And it brings tears to my eyes every Christmas morning, thinking that some kid who lives in a less fortunate family, and the parent doesn't have to be embarrassed by thinking that it was given by somebody else. Like it just really is it's a great story, and you've been such a great partner in that, giving us great families.
We love that program.
Incredibly appreciative.
It's like the highlight of our year. We just enjoy doing that so much, and you and your people have just been incredible. And we're not talking about just your run-of-the-mill basic Christmas gifts for people. I mean, they really go all out.
They do.
They make it so special.
Yeah.
And the gratitude that these families have expressed over the years is just incredible. Because we really scrutinize to make sure that we're getting. Because unfortunately, Mike, there are people who take advantage of these type of things. So they'll go to the Christmas Bureau, then they'll go to JCO, and they'll go to wherever they can. Just and sometimes they need it, sometimes they don't really need it. So we want to be extremely careful in choosing the families for you, because you've entrusted us with this, so that we're making sure that these are good, hardworking families who are humble and who are truly like.
Well, I'll tell you the tribute to that, John, is that one year I think we bought one of the families. It was a single mom. And she worked 2 jobs, went to school at Clinton, had 3 kids. I mean, really just busting her ass, trying to make it right. And I think we gave her a $200 gift card, maybe Stop and Shop or something like that. And I think she returned it to you. And she said, I only wanted it for my kids. And that's what you go, those are the people we should be helping. Like, this is a noble, honorable person who's just trying to make ends meet. It's great. It's just great stuff.
Yeah.
So what's on John Bernardi's horizon?
You mean this afternoon or 10 years from now? That's a wide swath.
Where's Bernardi? So here's what I know about you. No matter where you are, you're going to be skiing.
Well, yes.
I
skied right up until April 24th,
Of course you
Mike.
did. Of course you did.
Karen and I were at Jay Peak on their last day. Prior to that, I was at Sugarbush. This is after Whiteface closed. We went to Sugarbush, had a great day there. That was the 18th of April. Then we were at Jay on the 24th of April. So yeah, of course I'm going to
ski. You know what's great about you?
What I do.
You're like an expert skier. You can go ski anywhere you want to. But if I go with you, you're good enough to just hang out on the little blue trails and the baby trails so I don't get hurt. Although you do try to egg me on to go to the places where I could take a really bad spill. No. So I'm like, I have to be conscious of that.
Skiing for me is, I'm 55. I'll be 55 this month, so I'm not a kid anymore. So I try to be a little more careful. But skiing is a lot of things to me, and it's the camaraderie part of it is a big part of it. So you and I on the chairlift, spending the day together, having conversations, laughing, picking on each other, spending quality time in some beautiful setting. To me, that's every bit as important as the actual skiing, maybe more so. And so it's just a part of my life that is really multifaceted. It's a little bit about the actual skiing. It's more about the lifestyle and similar to golf. I mean, you're an avid golfer,
very
so
similar.
There's a lot of similarities there. I never got bit by the golf bug. But I know enough about it to know that there are similarities.
You're right. The fun in golfing is really the camaraderie that's out there, not the, golfing's part of it and you like to play and all that, but it is. You're out there for 4 or 5 hours with people that you like and enjoy, and you're having fun and having some laughs and sometimes talking about some serious stuff. So
it's the gear and it's the, it's the fresh air and the, the scenery. It's all of these things. You got your indoor golf center.
Simulator here, so
I got my own little ski shop at the house.
Of course.
So same idea. But what's on my horizon? Well, you never know what's around the next corner. I have no plans or intentions of changing jobs. I enjoy it a great deal, and there's more work to be done, and it's still fun. But who knows? I mean, you never know what's around the corner. I don't ever see myself working in a different field. It's all I've ever done. It's all I know.
You're a natural in this field.
Well, I appreciate that. It's been rewarding. It's been, I haven't gained a tremendous amount of monetary wealth in my life as a result, but I'm not complaining. Great life, and I make a comfortable living. So that wasn't a complaint, but friends of mine have gone a different route and made millions. And I never wanted that. In fact, I was, don't get me wrong, I like nice things.
Sure,
I like good life, appreciate that very much. But I was with a friend of mine who went a very different route, a childhood friend of mine, and he went into commercial banking and made millions. And he's retired completely now. He's my age. And we were talking one day, and he was, I don't know if bragging's the right word, about all this wealth he's built up and all these vacations and all these things he's done, in big house and, Jersey and all this and that and the other thing. And, I just listened to it, and then he spent some time with our family, so he knows our life too. And at the end of it, he said, "You know what? I think I'd trade everything I ever had for the life you have." And I said, "I wouldn't trade a thing for your life." Because, he was telling me, he said, "I barely ever went to any of my kids' things at school." And I said, Matt, his name's Matt, friend of mine. I said, "Matt, I never missed one of them.
Right.
I never missed a one of them." And, this list of complaints and regrets, and I said, "Take your $10 million then. Keep it. I don't want it," because you can't judge the value of your life by the size of your checkbook.
It's funny you say that, John. I live, I'm a guy who, and I don't have any regrets in my life. I'm 57 years old, John. I'm incredibly happily married. I love the business that I have. I love the people that I work with. I love the life I have in recovery. I love my friends. I love all that stuff. And everything that happened in my life happened to get me to this point at 57, so I don't necessarily regret that. And I'm more like you, John. I've had some material success. Our business is flourishing. We've done okay, and I wouldn't categorize myself as wealthy, but certainly I've done okay. I live a good life. And you know what? I was talking to my wife, who you know very well, a few years ago, and we both acknowledge that we might actually be less happy or less satisfied then than we were 15 years ago, when it was not a struggle, but it didn't matter so much. Like there really is something to that. And you know, one of the things we said is that we're not going to be worried about buying new homes or doing any of that. We're going to be worried about spending our life having experiences, because those are what really matter. And you know, you liken it to the whole funeral thing. You know, if you go to a funeral and you listen to somebody eulogize somebody, nobody ever says, well, he had 9 homes and he spent, they say, I remember the time I got to go fishing with him and we caught a big fish and somebody fell out of the boat and it was hysterical. That's the stuff that people talk about, because that's the stuff that matters. You know, I've had this conversation with my father multiple times. You know, 2 years ago, my father's got a couple of jet skis. He lives on the lake, and we're out playing on the jet skis. Might have even been last year. And we went over by the head of the river, the mouth of the river. Didn't realize how shallow it was in there, so we ran one of the jet skis. Let me say this, so if my father watches it, I ran my jet ski aground. He did not. Got a rock up in the propeller, so you know, shut it. So we had this slow trip back to his house, and it's like, that's the stuff that I remember. Like that's the stuff, that's the day, the story that I remember. And so we spend our life trying to have experiences, as opposed to trying to make sure that my home's as big as the next guy or my car's as nice as the next guy. And I'm like you, not that nice things aren't cool. Like I like having a good set of golf clubs and you know, but that's not what drives me, never has been, and it's not what drives you. And probably that's why guys like you and I have been able to be good friends, because it's not, you know, those things don't drive us.
Are you still in the same house?
Still in the same.
Okay,
you know, but I'll tell you a quick story about this.
Because I thought at one point you were thinking about making a move.
We put, I think, 5 offers in on homes in this area that we wanted to buy. Couldn't get any one of them, including the last one that we put in. Like the second day it was on the market, we put an offer in for, I think, $2,000 more than they were asking for. And somebody gave them more than that. So we've become a bit discouraged by the whole thing.
Could imagine.
You know, we're still looking. Our house is fine. It works for us. We don't need, you know, that's a luxury problem for us. We're not in that Alice place where we have a perfectly comfortable, fine home that we can live in. We'd like one that's a bit more modern and all that. But if it doesn't happen for a year or two, you know, that's okay. And when Lizzie and I were getting discouraged about it, that's one of the things we said. We said, you know what, think about it. We're discouraged because we didn't get the home that we thought we wanted. We have this perfect home with 2 dogs and cars and a pool, and we're like, think about people who their decision isn't which home they're going to, it's do I eat tonight or do I go get my medication? And when you can always keep that in perspective, you really do look at things as luxury problems. This is a luxury problem for me. It's not a real problem.
And you know, I do. For whatever reason, I've always been able to appreciate the smaller things, the finer things, the things in life that really matter, and be grateful for those things.
Yeah.
So, you know, I grew up in sort of a middle-class suburban. My father was a lawyer. He died young. He was 47. I was 12. So, you know, I certainly missed him for a good part of my life. But he provided a pretty nice life for us.
Right.
And so I've not lived in poverty.
Right.
Like, I've never lived in poverty. But I think through my work, I've just developed an appreciation for, I guess, just being grateful that I have a good life, and I don't need a Cadillac, and I don't need a mansion. This is great. What I got is great, and every day I wake up and I'm grateful for it. So I'm lucky in that respect, because some people chase their tail their whole life. They're always looking for something that is more than what they have, without taking the time to appreciate what they have. I know people, you know people, friends of ours, you know, we know people that are always, I call them malcontents. No matter what is happening in their life, they're always chasing something else. They need something more. And I'm like, this is it. I mean, most days I'm like, this is what I want. I'm living my dream.
You remember Reader's Digest used to have those little quotable quotes. They used to have quotes in their magazine. One of the ones that I read years ago was, genuine happiness is wanting what you have, not having what you want. And that has always stuck with me. That's right. Genuine happiness is wanting what I have, not having what I, because I can always want more, and it doesn't matter what I get. There's always going to be the next shiny object. And you're right. And when I spoke at the college the other night at the event you didn't come to,
plus a third time on our way in. So it's actually,
it'll take me a week or so to get over it, but I'll be good in a week or two. But I said, actually, it was the next day when they gave me the honorary degree. I said, I try to live my life by 3 kind of words every day, and honesty, humility, and gratitude. And if I have those 3 things every day, I'm going to be okay. Like, I'm going to live an okay life, and they're not all that hard. It's like, it's pretty easy to be honest. It's pretty easy to have some humility, and it's easy if I focus on it to be grateful for what I have, and I have a lot, and so do you. And I know that you're grateful.
Absolutely.
That's
words,
cool.
Those are words to live by.
Yeah.
For
Do
sure.
you have anything you want to add before we kick you out of here? And
Well, congratulations to you, Mike,
Thank
for and I'm immensely proud that you credit me as one of the guys who pulled you out of the shadows. Because if I pulled you out of the shadows and you have shined your light as a result of that, you have brightened this world that we live in.
Thank you.
And I've seen some of the things you've done, been part of some of the things you've done, and it's really impressive, and is so important to helping not only people understand what some of these issues are, but also create solutions and strategies for addressing them. MHAB is just a phenomenal campus and a phenomenal concept, and something we really needed in this region. And all of your work around recovery and mental health and community engagement. And the other thing I want to mention, you and Betsy and your colleagues deserve a tremendous amount of credit. Back to Alice for a second, is that one of the important components of Alice is to, again, shine this light on, but to encourage employers to understand what it is.
Right.
And to create an environment within their company that provides an environment that Alice folks can thrive in and survive, and have be able to build that kind of life we're talking about.
Yep.
And there's some good examples of it, but none better than your organization.
Thank you.
None better. And I use it all the time. I said to people when we talk about this, I say, well, the Northeast group, they got it down. Here's what they do, and here's why that is the type of environment. There's other examples, but most of those have developed as a result of what you've done. There's a few good ones. Mold Right is one that I've seen really, really grow in terms of understanding the concept, and they used a lot of the things you started.
Eric Zeisloft, who runs Mold Right, and I had tremendous conversations about that. And he's kind of funny, John, because he's like you. He was brought up not well off, but he never really struggled with, but he has an understanding and an appreciation and really values wanting to help.
Yes.
Which is great because he doesn't have the personal experience, but he really has jumped on board. And you're right; they are my other kind of shining example of somebody. And I will tell you, the 2 premier employment agencies here, ETS and Coyer, have both also jumped on board with it and really been really take the time when people come in to interview to understand what their problems are and things like that. And when they're trying to place the potential employee, take the time to talk to the employer about, okay, so this person is on drug court, or this person has this, or this person has that. So you're right. We're making inroads with people to begin to, start to change that a little bit. I think.
Deb Cleary from ETS is a big supporter of Alice, and David Courier is on my board and is also a big supporter. And you're right, both agencies are very, very empathetic
incredibly helpful with the MHAB people. We send MHAB people to either one of those places, and they go out of their way to try to find a good home and to help the people, and really, so you're right. And that's more of that whole community thing, John. We just are so blessed in this community to have the kind of people that we have running the organizations that are involved in this. So will you come back and visit me again?
Of course.
Maybe we'll even have Betsy here.
Well, it would jazz things up a little bit if you had Betsy here, right?
Well, she irritates me most of the time, but I love her, but she irritates me.
You two have this really interesting, like, sibling type of relationship where you get under each other's skin all the time, but you can't live without each other.
Her granddaughter listens to the podcast and always asks her every time she listens to it, why does Uncle Mike talk over you all the time? It's like, well, because that's what happens, because that's our relationship.
Well, you and Betsy have this ongoing competition of who can talk over who.
I usually win.
You usually win.
Oh, yeah.
You're one of the few that can talk over Betsy.
One of the few that can talk over Betsy, that's right.
Could tell her I said that.
Well, she'll see it firsthand when she sees this.
Yeah.
So I think, one of the things we wanted to do on this when we started is, we have guys like you that are so instrumental. And you come back regularly, once a year or whatever, and just update us and make sure that we're making progress. Because I think one of the things that podcasts do, on top of allowing me to sit in front of a camera and talk, which I just love to do, they do allow us to hold ourselves accountable to make sure that we're doing the stuff that we're saying we're doing. It's easy to get up and give a speech. It's easy to, present all this stuff. The hard part is, are you doing the work behind that and making sure that we're doing that? And I think we do a relatively good job of that, but this is just another way to say, okay, so look, John was here a year ago and he talked about this, and now we've added this as a new program, or we're doing this, or the financial piece that you're doing to help people that are Alice, I think is fabulous. I think that those types of things are just terrific. And I will tell you the other thing that we need to focus on, and I'm going to have a hard time saying this because I don't have kids and I'm not sure I even like kids, but the whole daycare issue is such a huge problem. And the pandemic really brought to light how big a problem that was when kids couldn't go to school and couldn't go to daycare. And parents are now trying to figure out, how do I go to work and still take care of my kids when I can't send them to an overpriced daycare? I mean, it really is and I'm sure you see that in the Alice place.
Well, speaking of the pandemic, a year ago, more than a year ago, last March, when things really changed in this region, and I was actually skiing that day that our world changed. I was at Whiteface. It was
the 18th. Is that what it was? March 18th, I think.
Of March, and I was at it was a Sunday. Yeah. 17th, 18th of March, whatever it was. I was at Whiteface in the morning with Karen. We had a great morning, and we were home by, I don't know, about 11 or 12 or so. And first thing that happened was I got a text from somebody who was still at the mountain and said, "John, they're closing for the season." And I said, "How could that be? I just left there. Everything was great." They announced they're closing for the season. And then my phone started lighting up that Sunday afternoon. It was Mark Davey, it was Billy Jones, and a number of other people. And what happened was that Sunday afternoon is when it became well known that the schools were going to close and our world was going to change. And so, you speak of relevance. We made a conscious decision at the time that we're gonna throw ourselves in harm's way and become one of those organizations that's out there in the forefront of dealing with the issues that need to be dealt with. And so we never closed, not for a day. To this day, we have never closed. And we were the first nonprofit in the region that got deemed an essential business. And it was actually at the request of the governor's people who contacted me and said, "Would you be willing to stay open, because we need a nonprofit that will make sure that there's this network of." I said, "I never was going to close. Right. You don't have to ask me to stay open." And so we got the first essential nonprofit business delineation. I'm proud of the work we did, but childcare was a major concern right from the get-go. Transportation was the other, and food insecurity was. Those were the big three. last spring. And we've addressed a lot of those, although child care is still an issue. They're all still issues. What's become sort of an emerging issue in recent months is housing, and not only availability, but for homeless, risk of homelessness, like rental assistance, mortgage assistance, back taxes. Because what happened, Mike, this is interesting, is last spring the governor, of course, announced that people would be forgiven. He meant temporarily, for their rent last March, April, May, and June, right? But I knew what that meant. That meant that people are still going to have to pay that rent. Right. Landlords across the region cannot be expected to cover their tenants' rents for 6 months.
Right.
But it wasn't clear what the communication was. So Alice families thought they were in the clear.
Right.
For rent for March, April, May, June, and went through the summer, actually. Yep. But I knew, well, in the fall, this is going to become a crisis because they're not forgiven.
Right.
Landlords still got to get paid, and rightfully so.
Right.
So what's happened is that crisis has exacerbated and increased in intensity, and now people are behind by tens of thousands of dollars in some cases. With their mortgage or their rent, and so they're facing all these challenges. So housing's become a major issue for Alice family.
That was the big landlord issue. The big landlord issue was, look, it's all well and good if the governor wants to say we're going to give a moratorium on paying rent, but he also should be saying where that's going to come from. And I think that they made a colossal mistake in the way that they gave out stimulus money and the way that they added extra unemployment and didn't make it mandatory that you had to pay rent or necessities with that first. Right. And that was probably flawed logic, because you're right. Now when the courts open back up, you're going to begin to see all these lawsuits and landlords evicting people, and rightfully so. When if the government's giving you subsidies to help you and you're choosing to say, he also told me I don't have to pay my rent, that's not probably the right way that it should have been done. And so you're right, we're heading in a place that could get bad for a while.
And the pandemic that's just one example of the confusion that even now there's great confusion around CDC guidelines.
Should we wear masks? We don't have to wear a mask.
One of the things I've been doing and spending a lot of time with lately, Mike, is around the vaccine process. As you probably know, we're the northern region, so it's 7 counties, called a vaccine hub, and CVPH is the hub of that vaccine network. And so their job is to coordinate the vaccination process. 7 counties, so all the way to Watertown and back, and south to Lewis County. It's a huge region, and they called upon me to chair this task force called the Health Equity Task Force, and what that is focused on is making sure that there is equitable access for Alice families, homeless people, disabled people, elderly people, BIPOC communities, migrant farm workers, Amish, and so groups that may be underserved or hard to serve. And hard to reach. And I've really loved this work. It's been fascinating work.
I might have actually even called you when or maybe I called Rochelle, because I think Rochelle's also on that.
She's part of the Health Equity Task Force,
So when they opened the drive-through vaccine site over here, thought it was a great idea. That's where I got my vaccines. I think they're efficient. They did a great job.
Oh, yeah,
they were very
absolutely.
helpful. But I remember, I think it was probably Rochelle I called, and I said, okay, so we're talking about how poor people, Alice people, whatever, are struggling to get vaccinated. But we put a drive-through only vaccine site. I got 100 residents at MHAB. 4 of them, I think at the time, maybe 6, have cars. What are they going to do about vaccines? So we asked people that live in MHAB, 90 or 100 residents, how many of them would be willing to be vaccinated. And I think we had 10 or 11 that agreed. Then the hospital, we got in touch with the hospital, and the hospital agreed to come over and do an on-site vaccination. So we went back to the people and asked how many were willing to get vaccinated, and I think we had 58 people that were willing to get vaccinated. And so that's just a perfect example of when we made it easy for people to do this, they were more than willing to do it. But when it was hard and challenging and they didn't know how they were going to do it, they're just like, well, whatever, I'm not going to bother with that. And sometimes I think those of us that are in positions of responsibility forget that the person who you're trying to help, who's sitting at the bottom, already feels like society has shit on them for a long time. Whether it's right or wrong, that's how they feel. And whether society has or hasn't, that's how they feel. And every time you put up, you use the word, every time you put up another barrier for them, it just further ingrains in them that, see, they don't care. They don't care about us. They token talk about us. And when you can do things that show that that's not what we're doing, and I think that's what we tried, that's when you begin to see people flourish and prosper and begin to get out of that position of generalized poverty and a lifestyle that just doesn't allow them to have, my statement is their version of the American dream, like whatever their version. And it's funny that you and I talked about, you talked about your friend Matt and all the money he had and yours, and, you and I are similar. Like, I'm not trying to push on people who are less fortunate than me what they should do with their life. I'm just trying to push on them that you should determine what you want your life to be, and then you should go have that. And it can be, we live in this great world and great country that gives us this opportunity. Like, you have opportunity to go and be and do whatever it is that you think is valuable to you. And we're here trying to help you get there. That's what we're trying to do. So.
Right.
It's great stuff. What you do up there is great stuff, and your team is fabulous. And
Thank you.
Your golf tournament is even a decent golf tournament.
Well,
so
we're looking forward to having you there.
We have a lot of fun in
next
your golf
month.
Tournament.
Hope we get a nice day like today out there.
And I'm suspecting that next year we'll be back to normal.
I think so. I hope so. Yeah, we're definitely getting there. I would encourage people to get the vaccine if they haven't. Yeah. And again, our work is focused around making sure that people can access it if they want it.
Yep.
And we're making some progress, but it's really important, and it will help us get back to normal.
Yeah. Do you know, John, and you and I think lean somewhat the same way in some of our beliefs about the world, but I wasn't necessarily enamored with getting the vaccine. I was a little reluctant at first. And I talked to people that were in the field and listened to what they said, and I was okay with doing it. But for me, it was even more that I want my life back. I want to be able to go and live, and I want to go to a hockey game, I want to go to a movie, I want to go to a place. And if the way to that is through the vaccine, then I'm willing to do it, selfishly, because I want to be able to go back to living just like I was living before. I want to ski, I want to play golf, I want, without having all of these restrictions placed on me. That's how I try to promote the vaccine. Forget about and the second piece is, I don't necessarily trust the government. I think you and I have had those conversations before, but I find it hard.
Except for Billy Joe.
Except for Billy, we do like
record.
We do like Billy. Yes, we do like Billy sometimes. But they wouldn't have put a vaccine out to try to vaccinate 300 million people if it really was going to be detrimental to your health. It's not practical. It wouldn't make good sense.
Right.
So I do believe that it's safe as they can probably make it at this point. And so I was happy to get it. And I had probably the same adverse effects that a lot of people do. The second shot kind of knocked me out for, about 36 hours. But I've not had any other reaction or feeling to it. And it does, you feel a little bulletproof, a little more like I feel comfortable going out and being somewhere.
I tell people, and I'm not a medical professional, so I'm just doing my job as the chair of the Health Equity Task Force, not trying to be a medical professional, but this is my personal belief that any risk that the vaccine would create, which is so minuscule, is a much better risk to take than the potential long-term effects of becoming infected with COVID-19. For me, I'll take the vaccine. Any chance on the vaccine, easy decision for me personally. Because I'm not a big vaccine guy either, but when it came down to, okay, you can get it, I'm like, I'll take it. Because I'm thinking I'll take my chances on a vaccine, because I know people that have young people in their 30s who they call long haulers.
Yeah.
who just can't get over this thing.
Yeah.
Neurological issues. I said, I don't want to take that.
I don't want to
chance.
have that. I don't want to. And it's. Look, the pandemic is the pandemic. It's a serious virus, killed a lot of people. I made a commitment to myself back when this first happened that I was gonna cut everybody slack for the way they believe, the way they react. And this is tough for everybody. People have beliefs, this has been a really tough year for everybody. And we shouldn't shame people who got it. We shouldn't shame people who are refusing to get the vaccine. We should try to talk to them about why we think it's good. But this has been hard on everybody for a variety of different reasons. I finally got to go see my mother in the nursing home, a month ago. And for a year, we haven't been able to see my mother. And you think about it and go, I understand why. But I often say this, John, that, if you were to ask my mother a year ago, you can see your kids whenever you want to, but there's a chance you could get COVID and die. Or you can't see your kids or anybody for a year and you're not going to get COVID, but you could die in that year from some other reason because you're 85 years old anyway. Which would you want? I'm pretty sure that most of those people would say, I want my family here and I'll take the risk of, you know what I mean? And I'm not faulting the nursing homes for what they did or anybody, but it's been such a tough year for all of us. And I'm so happy to be kind of getting out of it. So. And you and I could probably sit here and talk for 3 hours, John, because I genuinely like you. And,
well,
you're all right.
That's high praise then, Mike. Because,
you're all right.
Yeah.
But
if I'm on that list, if I'm on your good list, what more could I possibly want?
You've fallen one wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of the college thing. But you've only fallen. That's 3. Is that 3 or 4?
5.
That's 4 or 5.
You got me once on the way in and 4 times here. So
thank you for coming today. I really do appreciate it. And
it's been fun. It's always great to spend time with you, and you're one of my favorite people.
Well, thank you for that.
I consider you a close friend and a valued confidant and just a wonderful guy that I love being around. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate that. And we're going to put you on, and next year we'll do it when Betsy's here, so you can get a little fun with both.
Well, Betsy and I'm the chair of the hospital board. She's the vice chair, so she's coming in.
Right.
And so I see Betsy a lot.
I know you do.
And so she's a firecracker.
And you're Rotarians.
And
like you and Betsy are the true meaning of elitist in Plattsburgh. You do fit the bill.
You just said I was humble.
True elitist in Plattsburgh. That's what I think of when I think of you. But so thanks a bunch for coming, and we're going to have you back. So listen, couple things before we wrap up. No Caustic sweatshirt this week. I have the Islander sweatshirt on because the playoffs just started. So by the time this airs, I could be a Stanley Cup champion, or at least my team could be a Stanley Cup champion by then. So I wanted to wear something that was appropriate. So I didn't get the Caustic one, but I have some more Caustic ones going. Secondly, I think I made a commitment to do a quote every week, right? Did I say that? Last week I didn't have one, did I? So I have a good quote. Okay, it's about change. If you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. Think about that going forward. We don't have a closing statement anymore either, do we? Because we're not using COVID out anymore. So thank you for coming. Betsy won't be back next week, so you got 2 podcasts without Betsy, making my day. And we will be talking to Bryn and Telly next week about behind the scenes recovery podcast. And thanks again to our guest, Mr. John Bernardi, the godfather of Plattsburgh, New York.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, folks. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us today at Recovery Uncovered. No matter where you are in your recovery journey, or if you're supporting the recovery journey of a loved one, just know today is the first day of the rest of your life. Visit our website at mhab.org.
And if you want to become an old-timer in recovery, don't use and don't die. This has been Recovery Uncovered.